The lights outside the cafe blurred against the window, orange and soft like they were mocking me for sitting there alone. My reflection stared back, pale, quiet, pretending to belong to this table of people who barely noticed I was there. I smiled once, a small practice smile, and said softly, "My name is Charlotte Williams. I'm 32, and tonight my husband's family threw their annual Halloween party without inviting me." His mother leaned forward across the table, voice sharp and sweet all at once. "Oh, Charlotte, we thought you'd be too busy working again." The way she dragged that last word made the others laugh, a polite laugh, the kind people use when they don't want to pick sides. I froze. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup until I could feel the heat through the porcelain. The spoon clinked once against the saucer before I realized I hadn't even stirred it. I looked down so no one would see my hands trembling. The smell of cinnamon and pumpkin filled the air, warm and cheerful, completely out of place with the sting in my throat. I wanted to say something, anything, but words don't come easy when you're being publicly reminded that you don't belong. So I just nodded, pretending it didn't matter. Maybe you've been there too, watching people you love act like you're invisible. If you have, you'll understand what came next. It wasn't the first time they'd forgotten me. Or maybe forgotten was too kind. Every year, there was always a reason. Too busy, too tired, too much work. They'd host these perfect little gatherings, matching costumes and glowing pumpkins, while I stayed home answering emails and convincing myself I wasn't missing much. But this time hurt different, because this time I wasn't even supposed to know. I found out by accident, an overheard whisper, a Facebook post half hidden from my feed, a slip in conversation when my husband said, "Mom's excited about the theme this year." Then silence. That kind of silence where both of you know too much already. I had told myself not to make it a big deal. "They probably forgot," I had whispered into the bathroom mirror. But standing there now, watching his mother twirl her wine glass and grin at me like I was a child interrupting grown-up talk, I finally understood. They didn't forget me. They never intended to remember. The conversation moved on without me. They talked about decorations, guests, the menu, the weather, everything except the one thing sitting heavy between us. I laughed once, too late, at a joke I didn't hear. My husband's sister gave me that pitying look, the one that says, "Don't embarrass yourself." My coffee had gone cold. I took a sip anyway, just to have something to do with my hands. The taste was bitter. I kept thinking about last year, how I'd spent the whole day baking pumpkin pies that never left our kitchen because no one came by. How I'd sat in the living room waiting for the call that never came. And the year before that, when I'd offered to host and they'd said the drive was too far. Every memory layered itself quietly over this moment until I felt buried under them. When the check came, I reached for it out of habit. "I've got it," I said. But my husband's mother laughed lightly. "Oh no, dear, we've already covered ours." The way she said ours made sure I knew I wasn't part of that word. I smiled again, the polite kind that hides the shaking in your chest. "Of course," I said. My voice didn't break, though I felt it might. Outside, the air was cold enough to bite. Leaves skittered across the parking lot like they were in a hurry to get away. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked toward my car, heels clicking softly against the pavement. The windows of the restaurant glowed behind me, orange, gold, full of laughter that wasn't mine. Through the glass I could see them still talking, still smiling. My husband leaned close to his mother, his face relaxed, easy. He looked like someone who belonged. For a moment I stood there just watching, wondering when exactly I became the outsider in my own marriage. Maybe it was the day I stopped trying to please them. Maybe it was the day I started standing up for myself in small ways, changing the curtains without asking, saying no to dinner when I was tired. Small things that made me feel alive again. Things they saw as rebellion. The rain started then, light and cold. I let it fall against my face. My phone buzzed in my bag, but I didn't reach for it right away. I wanted just one more minute to breathe, to let the quiet sink in. When I finally checked, the message glowed against the dark screen, a photo from my husband's cousin, smiling beside a carved pumpkin, captioned, Family night at its best. The background was unmistakable. His parents' living room. My husband stood right there in the middle, dressed like he'd been planning it for weeks. I stared at the screen until the image blurred. Then I looked up at the sky, gray and wide and uncaring. I told myself not to cry. I told myself it didn't matter. But betrayal doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it's soft, like laughter behind a closed door you weren't invited to walk through. I unlocked the car, slid inside, and sat there with the engine off. The rain tapped against the windshield, steady and gentle. My reflection in the mirror looked older somehow, smaller too. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to fit into that family. The dinners I hosted, the gifts I bought, the quiet apologies I gave for things I didn't do. And it hit me. Maybe they'd never see me as one of them. Maybe I was never meant to be. But what hurt more wasn't the exclusion. It was the realization that I'd built my life around people who didn't even want me in the picture. I wiped the fog off the window and watched the road stretch ahead, slick with rain and headlights. Somewhere inside the restaurant, they were probably still talking about next year's party, already planning the theme. For the first time, I didn't wish to be there. I just sat in that silence and let the truth burn clean. Then my phone buzzed again, a different message this time. A friend forwarding me a "Psst. Can't wait for the Halloween bash at the Lakeview Resort tomorrow." The same resort my husband's family had been talking about all month, the one they dreamed of buying together. The caption read, "Private family event, guests only." I exhaled slowly, the air fogging the mirror again. I didn't know it then, but that moment, alone in the rain, heart steady in my chest, was the last time they'd ever get to decide where I didn't belong. Because next year, I wouldn't wait for an invitation. I'd own the place they loved most, and they'd have to ask me for permission to come in. I still remember the first Halloween after we got married. I stayed up all night stringing orange lights along the porch and baking pumpkin pies from scratch. I thought it would be our thing, a small family tradition to start our life together. But no one came that night. Not his parents, not his sister, not even a call. Just the sound of wind and the smell of burnt sugar in my kitchen. I told myself they were busy. I always told myself that. Back then, I believed effort could make people love you. I believed kindness could fix distance. I gave more than I had, every time. I worked double shifts at the clinic and still helped my husband Ryan set up his new contracting business. I covered half the startup costs without hesitation. When his parents couldn't afford their property taxes, I paid those too, pretending it was a gift. But I was the one treated like charity. His mother used to smile at me and say, "You're lucky, Charlotte. A man like Ryan doesn't come easy." Lucky. That word always landed like a slap I had to thank her for. I never corrected her. I just smiled, because that's what polite wives do when they're being put in their place. Every year they'd host their perfect family Halloween party, full of laughter, music, and expensive decorations. And every year, I stayed home pretending not to notice the photos posted online. I tell myself I was tired, that I needed rest, that I didn't even like parties. But the truth was simple. They never wanted me there. I remember one year when I tried to help them decorate. His sister, Grace, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, we already have a theme. You wouldn't really get it." Then she handed me a box of napkins and walked away. I stood there for a while, holding that box like it meant something. Ryan always said I imagined things, that I made small issues into big ones. "They like you," he'd insist. "You just don't see it." But affection doesn't hide behind exclusion. Love doesn't whisper behind doors when you walk in. I tried to talk to him again the night after that dinner, the one where his mother pretended she forgot to invite me. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his costume bag leaning against the armrest. The smell of his cologne filled the room. He didn't even look up when I spoke. "Ryan," I said quietly, "why didn't anyone tell me about the party?" He sighed, still focused on his screen. "Because it's not a big deal, Charlotte." "It's your family's annual event," I said. "I thought we were going together." He laughed under his breath. You take things too personally." That sentence sat heavy in the air, like something final. "I just don't understand," I whispered. "I helped plan last year's—" He cut me off. "You helped with snacks. Mom handles the rest." I stared at him, really stared. The man I once believed saw me as his equal now looked at me like a nuisance. A problem to manage. All those years I'd stood beside him, believing we were building something together. And here he was, making me feel like I didn't even belong in his life anymore. "Do you even want me there?" I asked. He finally looked at me then. His expression was tired, detached. "Charlotte, it's one night. Don't make it bigger than it is." He stood up, grabbed his costume bag and walked past me. The sound of the zipper closing felt louder than anything he said. I watched him head toward the door, his shoulders relaxed, like he was going somewhere safe, somewhere familiar, a place that didn't have space for me. As he reached for his keys, his phone slipped from his pocket onto the table. The screen lit up, bright in the dim room. I didn't mean to look, but I did. There it was, an RSVP email from his mother, confirming 2 guests, Ryan Williams and guest, Kara. My breath caught. Kara, his assistant, the woman he'd been mentoring for the last 6 months, the one his mother said was so helpful with business matters. I stood there frozen, my heartbeat slowing instead of speeding up. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask him who she was taking my place for. The silence between us had already told me everything. He noticed the phone then, snatched it up, and glanced at me with irritation instead of guilt. "You shouldn't be looking through my stuff," he said. "I didn't have to look far," I replied. My voice came out quiet, steady. It surprised even me. He didn't answer, just slung the bag over his shoulder and left. The door clicked shut behind him, the same way it had closed on me 100 times before, in 100 different ways. I sat on the couch for a while after that. The air felt thick, heavy with perfume and disappointment. I could still hear his mother's laugh from earlier, that sharp little sound that always followed my mistakes. I looked around the room, our framed wedding photo on the wall, the business awards with both our names, the small details of a shared life that suddenly felt staged. It was strange how quickly a home could turn into a stranger's house. I thought about every late night I spent managing his invoices, every early morning run to the bank, every time I covered for his missed calls or forgot my own dreams to help his. And somehow, in their eyes, I was still lucky to have him. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was lucky, just not in the way they meant. Lucky to finally see the truth without him explaining it to me. Lucky to finally stop mistaking endurance for love. The clock ticked in the quiet. I checked my phone out of habit. No messages, no calls, nothing from him. Just silence. I scrolled through social media, half out of pain, half curiosity. Within minutes, I found what I knew I would. Photos already posted. Ryan smiling under string lights, his arm around a woman dressed as Cleopatra. My mother-in-law in the background, beaming like she'd just introduced royalty. The caption read, "Family and tradition. What matters most?" I stared at it until my eyes blurred. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't comment. I didn't like or react. I just locked the phone and let it fall beside me. Somewhere deep inside, something small cracked. But underneath that crack was space, quiet, cold, and clean. I sat in that silence for a long time, long enough to understand that maybe being erased was the first step to being rewritten. And that night, as the wind howled outside and laughter echoed faintly through my phone, I made a promise to myself. Next year, I wouldn't be the woman they forgot. I'd be the one they'd never stop talking about. The sound of laughter hit me before I even saw the lights. It spilled out through the tall iron gates of the estate, carried by music and the easy rhythm of people who knew they belonged. I slowed down, headlights cutting across the gravel, and for a second I thought about turning back. But my hands stayed on the wheel. My chest felt tight, not from anger anymore, but from something quieter, acceptance. I had spent years trying to earn a place behind those gates. Tonight, I was finally done. I parked far enough away that no one would notice the car, close enough that I could still see everything. The mansion was covered in orange lights, fake spiderwebs hanging from the balcony, carved pumpkins glowing along the steps. It looked like a perfect picture, the kind of night families post online with words like tradition and love. Through the open archway, I saw him, Ryan, my husband. He stood under the porch lights wearing a navy suit and a smirk I used to think was confidence. Now it just looked like pride. On his arm was Kara, his assistant, the one from the RSVP email. She wore a gold mask, her hand hooked around his elbow like she'd always been meant to be there. My seatbelt pressed against my chest, but I couldn't move. It felt like watching a version of my life where I'd been erased and replaced by someone younger, shinier, easier to love. The music got louder when another car pulled up. I turned off the radio, needing silence more than sound. I could still hear everything: the laughter, the clinking of glasses, Kara's voice when she leaned close to whisper something that made him laugh. I remembered how that laugh used to make me feel safe. Now it just sounded expensive. I watched as his mother greeted them, holding a tray of champagne flutes like she was crowning a queen. "You look stunning, darling," she told Kara, kissing her cheek. Then she turned to Ryan. "You two are the image of success. Just perfect." Perfect. That word had followed me for years, always a reminder of what I wasn't. I'd been the practical one, the hard worker, the one who meant well. I was never perfect. Not to them. I wanted to leave, to drive away before the weight of it all crushed me. But I couldn't. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. I told myself I just needed to see it one last time, see the truth I had ignored for too long. The guests began to arrive, men in tailored suits, women in masks and heels that clicked against the stone driveway. Someone laughed too loud near the fountain. I could smell the faint mix of champagne and wood smoke even from where I sat. It was a scene I used to dream about being part of. I'd imagined myself laughing there beside Ryan, his arm around me, his mother smiling because she finally saw me as family. What a foolish dream that was. I rolled the window down slightly. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean, the kind of cold that wakes you up. I leaned back in the seat, eyes fixed on the entrance, and thought about the years I spent building their comfort while losing myself. When Ryan first started his business, I stayed up late helping him with numbers, paperwork, invoices. He'd thank me half-heartedly, already on his phone planning the next deal. I thought he was ambitious. Now I realized he was just greedy. Greedy for approval, for image, for control. And I was the quiet background he needed until something flashier came along. A man in a black mask walked up the steps, shaking Ryan's hand. I recognized him. Thomas, the real estate heir who always bragged about his father's investments. He laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that demands attention. "Next year, this place'll be ours," he said, raising his glass. "Dad's signing the resort deed soon. It'll be the biggest deal this family's ever made." His words cut through the night like a blade. I didn't blink. The resort. The same property I'd visited that morning. The same one I knew they were planning to buy. My breath caught. Not from pain this time, but from something new. A spark of clarity. I stayed still, letting their voices drift through the air. Ryan clapped Thomas on the back, saying something about how it was a family legacy. His mother smiled proudly, already claiming victory in her mind. Kara adjusted her mask, her hand brushing Ryan's arm again like it belonged there. I should have felt crushed. I didn't. I felt awake. Every betrayal, every slight, every empty chair at their dinner table finally connected in my mind. They weren't just excluding me out of cruelty. They were building something together, something they didn't want me to be part of. And now I knew exactly what that was. I reached for the ignition, but I didn't start the car right away. I sat there watching as fireworks lit up the sky above the estate, gold sparks falling over the roof like confetti. It looked beautiful, almost holy from where I sat. But beauty doesn't erase truth. The truth was simple. They were celebrating my absence. I thought about how many times I had waited at home for him, keeping dinner warm until the food turned cold. How many nights I had checked my phone just to see if he'd text. how many excuses I'd accepted because I wanted to believe he loved me. Tonight ended all of that. The mask theme wasn't just for the party, it was who they'd always been. People who hid behind smiles, kindness, and polished words. People who thought I'd keep pretending not to see. The laughter echoed again, softer now as the doors closed and the party moved inside. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the fog, washing the stone pillars in white light for a brief second. For that moment, I could see my reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes, red from holding back tears, but steady. As I drove away, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. The estate disappeared behind me, its glow fading in the distance like a fire burning itself out. For the first time in years, the silence in my car didn't feel lonely. It felt like space, wide, open, waiting. I knew what I had to do. They wanted that resort. They wanted legacy. They wanted to erase me. Let them try. I gripped the wheel tighter and whispered to myself, "You'll remember me soon." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. Ryan hadn't come home. His side of the bed was cold, his pillow untouched. I sat for a while at the edge of the mattress, staring at the half-open closet door where his jacket still hung. Then I stood, got dressed, and left. I didn't know exactly where I was going until I was already halfway down the highway. The resort they'd talked about the night before was about 40 minutes out of town. I remembered the name because Thomas had said it loud and proud, Lakeview Resort. It used to be beautiful once, before time and neglect turned it into something forgotten. I drove there without thinking, just following the road as the morning light broke over the hills. When I arrived, the gate was half rusted, hanging crooked on its hinges. The sign out front had faded letters and a missing corner, like even the name was giving up. The place looked like a ghost of what it used to be. Cracked pavement, overgrown grass, a few broken windows catching the light. But there was something about it that felt familiar. The stillness, the quiet, the way it waited for someone to care again. I parked near what used to be the reception office and stepped out. The air smelled like pine and damp wood. My shoes crunched on gravel as I walked toward the front door. It was unlocked. Inside, the dust floated in streaks of sunlight cutting through the blinds. Old furniture covered in sheets, a few faded posters of smiling families by a lake. My fingers brushed across the counter, and for a second, I saw my father's hands instead of mine, steady, patient, fixing what was broken. He used to manage small lodges when I was a girl. I'd watch him repaint rooms, replace old locks, scrub floors until they looked new again. He always said places have souls, and when people stop caring, the walls start to forget who they were built for. I hadn't thought about that in years. But standing there, I could almost hear his voice. Maybe that's why I felt drawn here, like the past was giving me a map. The floorboards creaked as I moved from room to room. The dining hall still had its chandeliers, though most of the bulbs were dead. The view of the lake through the glass doors was breathtaking, even with the fog rolling over it. I imagined what it might look like alive again. Lights glowing, people laughing, music playing softly through the night. Then I thought about the people who wanted to buy it, Ryan's family. They didn't see beauty here. They saw profit, another trophy to hang on their wall. A man's voice startled me. "You looking to buy, miss?" I turned. A tall man in his 50s stood by the door holding a clipboard. His clothes were clean but worn, his face tired in the way people's faces get when they've been waiting too long for someone to say yes. "I heard it was for sale," I said. He nodded. "Has been for months. Not much interest till recently." "You from the city?" "Sort of," I replied. "I'm just looking." He smiled faintly. "You and every other dreamer who walks in here." I walked with him to the front office. The floor creaked under our feet. "You said others were interested?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, flipping through his papers. "One big family deal. Think they're planning to close in a few days. Already sent their deposit." I looked out the dusty window. The image of Ryan laughing beside Kara flashed in my mind. I felt a strange calm wash over me. "Do you know who they are?" He shrugged. A local business family. Williams Construction, I think the paperwork said. The name hit like a slow punch, but I didn't flinch. I just nodded, keeping my voice steady. How much are they offering? He gave a small laugh. A steal. Property's worth over $2 million easy, but the owner just wants it gone. They're getting it for $800,000. I turned to him. And if someone else matched that? He looked up, curious now. You interested? I hesitated. I didn't have that kind of money, not yet, but I had assets, savings, a few investments in my name, my wedding ring even. The thought didn't scare me, it steadied me. I might be, I said. Could I see the paperwork? He nodded and pulled a folder from his briefcase. I flipped through the pages, survey maps, title history, pending contracts. My father had taught me how to read deeds and property transfers. I traced the lines with my finger, piecing it together like a puzzle. Then I saw it. The seller's clause. Final sale to the first confirmed full payment within 48 hours. They hadn't closed yet, not officially. The man watched me. You really thinking of buying this place? I closed the folder carefully. If I can. He studied me for a moment. You don't look like a developer. I'm not, I said. But I know what this place could be. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. It'll take more than hope to fix it. I have more than hope. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly, then lowered his voice a little. If you bring cash in 48 hours, it's yours instead. The words hung between us, sharp and quiet. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not grief, just resolve. I glanced back at the empty hall behind us, the cracked tiles, the silent rooms waiting for someone to care. This place had been forgotten, like me. But maybe that's why it called to me, because we both deserved a second chance. I looked at the man and said softly, "Keep the file ready." He smiled faintly. "I'll be here." When I walked back outside, the air smelled cleaner, the lake brighter even under gray clouds. I stood there for a moment, watching ripples move across the water. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what they'd taken from me. I was thinking about what I was about to take back. The panic started before the sun came up. I hadn't slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's family laughing at that party. Their glasses raised, Kara's hand on his arm. Their voices echoed in my head, proud and careless. Next year, this place'll be ours. They thought it was already done. They had no idea how fast things were about to change. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop screen. My savings account balance glowed back at me. Years of work, every long shift, every side job, every penny I'd quietly kept aside while pretending not to notice what was slipping away from me. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was something. I felt my heart racing, but my hands were steady. I'd been scared before, plenty of times, but this felt different. This fear was clean. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I saw her name. Mia Turner. We'd gone to college together. She'd become a lawyer, the kind of person who read people before they even started talking. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Charlotte, it's early. What's going on?" "I need your help," I said quietly. "And I don't have time to explain everything right now." She heard something in my voice because her tone changed immediately. "Where are you?" "At my house. I found a property. It's for sale, but there's another buyer. My husband's family. I need to buy it before they do." Silence stretched for a moment. Then she said, "That's bold." "I don't have a choice." Mia exhaled through the phone. "How much are we talking?" 800,000. She whistled softly. "You have that?" "Not yet," I said. "But I will." I could almost hear her calculating, deciding whether to talk me down or trust me. "I can draft the purchase documents," she said finally. "But Charlotte, are you sure you want to do this?" I looked around the kitchen. The unpaid bills, the half-empty coffee mug, the silent house that had stopped feeling like mine a long time ago. "I'm done being the ghost at their table." She didn't argue after that. She just said, "Okay, I'll start the paperwork." When the call ended, I stood up and opened my jewelry box. It was lined with the kind of things that had stories attached to them. My engagement ring, the gold necklace his mother gave me the day we married. I remembered her exact words when she clasped it around my neck. "Now you'll finally look like you belong." I held that necklace in my hand for a long time. The irony almost made me laugh. Then I placed it in the small velvet pouch beside the ring and a pair of earrings I'd worn only once. I drove to the jeweler's downtown, the same man who had appraised Ryan's watch collection last year. He didn't ask questions when I slid the pouch across the counter. He just examined the pieces and typed a few numbers into his calculator. "I can give you 32,000, he said. "Make it 35, I said calmly. "You know they're worth more." He looked at me, then nodded. 35. The money hit my account an hour later. I sold my car next. A man from a local dealership came by to pick it up. When he handed me the check, he said, "You sure? This thing's in perfect condition." "I don't need perfect," I said. "I just need enough." By noon, I'd transferred everything. Savings, jewelry, car sale, even the small inheritance left by my father. I stared at the total balance. It was just barely enough. $802,000. Every piece of my old life turned into numbers on a screen. Mia called again. "I've reviewed the title history," she said. "You're clear to purchase. I'm sending the wire instructions. Once it's sent, we'll get the deed in your name immediately." Her voice steadied. Me. She had no idea how much that meant. "Thank you," I said. "I should be thanking you. You just made the most terrifying decision I've seen all year." "It doesn't feel terrifying," I told her. "It feels overdue." She laughed softly. "That's how you know you're ready." The rest of the afternoon passed in fragments. I signed digital forms, confirmed transfers, and replied to emails from the broker who now sounded suspiciously eager to finalize the sale. The entire time, I kept glancing at the clock. Every tick sounded louder than the last. By 6, the bank called to confirm the final wire. The representative's voice was polite, detached, almost mechanical as she verified the numbers. I gave my approval, my voice calm, though my palms were damp against the desk. When I hung up, the house was quiet again. I sat on the floor beside the window, knees pulled to my chest, watching the light fade over the neighborhood. I thought about Ryan, probably sitting somewhere with a drink in his hand, laughing with people who thought I'd disappeared quietly from the picture. Let them laugh. Let them celebrate. By the time they realized what happened, it would be too late. I reached for my phone to text Mia a final confirmation. Before I could type, a notification buzzed at the top of the screen. "Wire confirmed. Transaction complete." For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then I opened the document she'd sent, a digital deed with my name printed neatly across the bottom. Charlotte Williams, sole owner. It didn't feel like revenge yet. It felt like oxygen, like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. My hands didn't shake when I signed. The pen moved smoothly across the page. My father used to tell me that power doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from silence, from doing what no one expects. As I saved the file, my reflection caught in the screen. Tired eyes, bare hands, no ring, no trace of the woman who used to wait by the door, hoping to be invited in. Now I wasn't asking for space at their table. I owned the table. I owned the roof above it. I looked at the message again. That single line glowing on my phone. Wire confirmed. They thought they had 48 hours to claim what was theirs. They never imagined I'd take it first. He came home just after sunrise, the smell of alcohol and cologne hitting me before he even said a word. His footsteps were heavy, uneven, dragging across the hardwood like the night hadn't quite let go of him yet. I was at the stove, making breakfast I knew he wouldn't eat. He tossed his keys on the counter, sighed like the world was on his shoulders, then smiled. "You won't believe it, Charlotte," he said, voice rough but proud. "We're this close to sealing the resort deal. Mom says it'll change everything for the family." I turned off the burner and let the toast sit too long. The edges blackened and curled, smoke curling toward the ceiling. I didn't answer right away. My hands moved automatically, sliding eggs onto a plate, pouring coffee into his cup. He didn't notice the silence. He never did. He sat down at the table and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "The party went great," he said. "Thomas brought in some heavy investors. Once the paperwork clears, it's done. Can you believe it? We'll finally have something big under our name." Our name. That word used to mean something. I placed the plate in front of him and sat down across the table, the smell of burnt toast filling the space between us. He didn't look at me. He was already scrolling through his phone, smiling at whatever message just came in. Probably her. "You seem happy," I said softly. He didn't catch the tone. "Yeah, it's a big step. I told Mom we deserve this. After all these years of work, we finally have something real." I nodded. "You do." He glanced up, confused by my calmness. He corrected. "We have something real." I just smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't need words to keep him comfortable. He took a bite of toast and winced. "You burned it." "I know." He shrugged, set it down, and reached for his coffee. "We'll celebrate once it's done. Maybe go away for a few days. You'll like the resort once it's fixed up." My chest tightened for a second, but not from pain, more from restraint. I looked at his face, pale, tired, still smug in that quiet, careless way of his. He had no idea that while he was clinking glasses with his mother and whispering promises to someone else, I'd already rewritten the ending of their story. He scrolled again, eyes half on me, half on his screen. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "You're quiet." "I've been listening." "To what?" "To everything." He frowned. "You're acting weird." I smiled again. "Maybe." He went back to his phone. I stood, walked to the counter, and opened the drawer. Inside was a single folder, thick, clean, and new. I slid it in under the old bills and closed the drawer slowly. My fingers brushed the handle once before letting go. He didn't notice. He was too busy talking about renovations, investors, and how much his mother trusted him with the business. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. He thought this was still his world, still his victory. "Mom says we'll close by Friday," he said, rubbing his eyes. "She's already calling the bank. Once the deed's signed, I'll finally be part of something solid. Maybe even put my name on the title next year." My voice came out low. "You always wanted your name on something, didn't you?" He chuckled. "Doesn't everyone?" I looked at the coffee mug in his hand. He hadn't taken a sip. It sat there, steaming, untouched, just like all the things I'd given him. "Some people build things quietly," I said. "Others just put their name on what's already been built." He blinked, half listening. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." I sat back down, folded my hands, and watched him. The light coming through the window was soft and gold, hitting the edge of his jaw. He looked smaller in the daylight, less like the man who had spent years filling the room with his voice. He finally took a sip of coffee, grimaced. "Cold. I made it an hour ago." He looked at the clock and sighed. "Guess I got home later than I thought." I almost laughed. It wasn't late, it was early. He didn't even realize he'd walked into a life that wasn't his anymore. I stood again, walked to the sink, and ran water over the pan. The sound filled the silence between us. Behind me, he kept talking, half to himself, about what he'd do once the resort was under their name. "We'll probably knock down half the cabins, maybe rebuild the main lodge. It's a mess now, but once Mom sees the numbers, she'll—" His phone rang, cutting him off. He glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's Mom," he said, putting her on speaker. "Hey, we were just talking about the deal." Her voice came through sharp and panicked. "Ryan, did you send the wire this morning?" He frowned. "No, not yet. I was going to do it after breakfast." "Why?" There was a pause. Then her voice rose to a near scream. "Someone else bought it!" He froze. The coffee cup hit the table hard, spilling over the edge. "What? That's impossible. We had the contract." "It's gone," she shouted. "It's been sold. The broker said the funds cleared last night. Do you understand what this means? We've lost it." He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Who bought it?" "He didn't say," she snapped. "He just said it was finalized under a new name. You were supposed to handle this." Mom, listen, I can fix it." No, she hissed. You've already failed. The call ended. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. He stood there, staring at the phone like it had betrayed him. His hand shook as he set it down. I watched him quietly, then turned off the sink. The sound of dripping water filled the kitchen. He didn't look up. Everything okay? I asked softly. He didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His shoulders dropped. I picked up a towel and dried my hands. You should eat before it gets cold, I said. He looked at me then, eyes clouded with something between confusion and disbelief. What? I asked, voice calm. You look like you've seen a ghost. He didn't say a word. I smiled again, the same quiet smile I'd worn all morning, the one that hides everything until it's too late to undo it. The toast on the table was burnt, the coffee untouched, the air between us heavy with smoke and silence. And under that silence, I could feel it. The first crack in the world he thought he controlled. The message came early in the morning. A short text from Ryan. Mom wants you at the house this afternoon. She says it's about the resort. Just come. Don't make it a scene. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Don't make it a scene. That was his way of saying know your place. I didn't reply. I just stared out the window at the quiet street and thought how strange it was that the people who owed me everything still believed I'd stay quiet forever. By noon, I was standing in front of their mansion again, the house that had always felt like a test I could never pass. The hedges were trimmed, the fountain still running, but it looked smaller now. Or maybe I had finally stopped shrinking for them. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. His mother, Evelyn, opened the door wearing pearls and a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Charlotte, she said, I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure I should, I said. She stepped aside anyway. We just want clarity, dear. You'll see. The living room looked staged, like always. Every cushion in place, every picture angled perfectly. Ryan sat on the couch next to his sister Grace, both pretending they weren't nervous. His father poured whiskey even though it was barely noon. Evelyn gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing. Ryan cleared his throat. Mom thinks there's been a misunderstanding with the resort property. Misunderstanding? I repeated quietly. Evelyn's tone softened the way people do when they're about to insult you. We know how overwhelmed you've been lately. Things like property paperwork can get confusing. The broker must have made an error listing you as the owner. I looked at her, waiting for the rest. She smiled again. It's fine, really. Once we transfer it back, there won't be any issues. We can even compensate you for the trouble. I almost laughed. Compensate me? Grace crossed her legs. You can't honestly think that place belongs to you. Ryan shifted in his seat. Charlotte, just explain what happened. You probably didn't know they were already in talks. His father spoke next, his voice slow and deliberate. This is business, not personal. You wouldn't understand the process. Evelyn nodded along. Exactly. You wouldn't understand business matters. I let the words hang in the air. That old familiar sting crawled up my throat, but it didn't burn the way it used to. I had spent years swallowing their small humiliations, pretending they didn't hurt. This time I didn't swallow. I looked at each of them, his mother's perfect posture, his sister's smug half-smile, his father's dismissive glare. Then I said quietly, actually, I own that business matter. The room went still. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to pause. Evelyn's smile cracked. What did you just say? I met her eyes. The deed, the title, the payment confirmation. All under my name. Lakeview Resort belongs to me. Grace let out a sharp laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to hide fear. You're joking. Ryan stood now, his voice rising. Charlotte, what are you talking about? I didn't raise mine. I bought it. Cash. 48 hours before your wire cleared. His father slammed his glass down. You can't do that. That deal was ours. No, I said. It was available. You assumed it was yours. You were wrong. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly. You can't possibly manage something like that. It's a large investment. I know, I said. I'm capable of handling things you all think I can't. She tried to recover her tone, but her voice cracked again. You had no right. I had every right, I said calmly. You made sure I was never part of your business, your dinners, your holidays, but you forgot that exclusion has a way of teaching people independence. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the air. That's when I felt it, the shift. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for years finally lifted. The fear was gone, replaced by something steady and quiet. There's a moment when silence becomes power, when you stop asking to be seen. That moment changes everything. Ryan's hands clenched at his sides. Why would you do this? He demanded. I looked at him, remembering every time he told me to let things go, to stay quiet, to stop taking things personally. Because you never believed I would, I said. Grace stood, her voice shrill. Mom, she can't get away with this. Evelyn ignored her. She turned to Ryan. Fix this, right now. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man who just realized the floor beneath him wasn't solid anymore. Charlotte, he said, his tone dropping to that low warning he always used when he wanted control. You need to transfer it back before you make this worse. Worse for who? I asked. For all of us, he snapped. I tilted my head. You mean for you? His jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. You don't even know what you've started. Oh, I do, I said. For once, I started something that doesn't end with me losing. His father stood up now, voice booming. This family built everything you have. I met his glare. Then you should have built it better. No one spoke after that. Evelyn's face had gone pale. Grace looked like she might cry. Ryan just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. I picked up my bag from the armchair. You said this meeting was about clarity, I said quietly. I think we found it. I turned toward the door, but before I could take another step, Ryan's voice cut through the silence, low and cold. What did you do, Charlotte? I stopped. For a moment, I almost turned around, but I didn't owe him the comfort of an answer. I walked out into the sunlight, letting the sound of his question follow me down the steps like a shadow that no longer belonged to me. The call from Mia came just after breakfast. Her tone was calm, but I could hear the tension hiding behind it. The papers are filed, she said. It's official now. They can challenge it, but it won't hold. You're the legal owner. I thanked her and ended the call, my voice steady. The coffee on the counter had gone cold, untouched, the way things always were before something changed. For years, I had let them talk over me, make decisions for me, laugh at me behind smiles. I remembered every word, every look. Evelyn telling me at the wedding, "You'll learn your place soon enough." Grace whispering to a cousin, "She's lucky Mom didn't find someone better for him." Ryan saying one night, half drunk, "You'd be nothing without me." I'd stood there smiling, pretending not to hear. But silence doesn't mean acceptance. Sometimes silence is storage. Every insult, every humiliation, stored, cataloged, waiting for its use. Now, it all had a place. Every memory had become a reason. I spent the morning at my desk, reviewing the documents Mia sent, ownership confirmations, registration forms, transfer receipts. My name appeared on every page, Charlotte Williams, simple, black ink, unshakable. I ran my thumb across it. For once, I didn't feel small reading my own name. Mia called again at noon. "They've started pushing back," she said. "Their lawyer filed a motion to question your purchase timing." "Let them," I said. "They're angry," she warned. "Evelyn called me directly. She wanted to know what kind of woman buys property out from under her own family." "I told you," I said quietly. "I'm not their family anymore." Mia hesitated. "Charlotte, be careful. They're not used to losing." I almost smiled. Neither am I. After the call, I went for a walk. The air felt heavy, the kind that clings to your skin and makes sound carry farther than it should. The world looked the same, but I wasn't. The fear that used to follow me like a shadow was gone. In its place, something colder, sharper, cleaner. I thought about the last argument Ryan and I had before everything broke. He'd accused me of embarrassing him in front of his parents because I questioned a bill that didn't make sense. "You don't know how this works," he'd said. "You're not built for business." He was right about one thing. I wasn't built for their kind of business, the kind that runs on lies and entitlement. I was built for survival, for patience, for silence that waits until the right moment. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights off, phone in hand, rereading Mia's message, filed and secured. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't yet. Revenge doesn't come with music or fireworks. It comes in small, quiet moments when the balance starts to tip. My phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I opened it expecting a spam link, but the words were short and familiar in tone. "You'll regret crossing us." For a second, I just stared at it. No name, no punctuation, no hesitation. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. And that told me exactly who it was from. Evelyn. She was never one to leave things unsaid. When kindness failed her, cruelty filled the space. I could almost hear her voice reading the message out loud, her manicured finger tapping the screen, her face tight with anger. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned the phone face down on the table and watched the reflection of the window in the glass. The world outside was gray, quiet, motionless. I remembered the first time she humiliated me in that same house. It was Christmas Eve, our first year of marriage. I'd spent hours cooking, stuffing, turkey, pies. When we sat down, she took one bite, then said to the table, "She tries. It's not how I make it, but she tries." Everyone laughed, even Ryan. I smiled then too, pretending it didn't sting. But I never forgot. Another flash. The night Grace mocked me for not having children yet. "You can't build a family by yourself," she'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I just nodded, holding my glass so tight I thought it might break. That's how I survived, by not reacting, by letting them believe they'd won every time. But every humiliation had a cost. They'd spent years racking up a debt they never expected to pay. When I finally picked the phone back up, I took a screenshot of the threat and forwarded it to Mia with a single line. "They're starting to show their fear." She replied instantly. "You want me to report it?" "No," I wrote back. "Let them think I'm scared first." That evening, I went through the resort's plans again. The old lodge needed repairs. Windows replaced, walls painted, roofs fixed. It didn't scare me. I'd built worse things from scratch. I called a contractor, made notes, organized schedules. Every small action steadied me. While they panicked, I prepared. When the sun began to set, I sat by the window and watched the light fade over the trees. My hands rested flat on the table, palms open. I thought of my father again, his steady voice when I was little, telling me that people show their true selves when money is on the line. He'd been right. They were showing me now exactly who they were. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "This isn't over." I stared at it, felt the corner of my mouth lift. "It's barely begun," I whispered. I didn't text it back. Some truths are meant to be lived, not spoken. I deleted the message, powered off my phone, and sat there, in the dim light, the house silent around me. Their threats didn't scare me. They confirmed what I already knew. I'd taken something they never thought I could hold, something they'd built on arrogance and greed, something they couldn't get back. And now, for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like control. The first time I walked into the resort after signing the papers, it felt like stepping into my own reflection. Cracked, tired, but still standing. The walls were faded, the paint peeling in long strips like old skin. Chandeliers hung crooked, their glass dusty and dull. I ran my fingers along a banister and left a clean line through years of neglect. Somehow it felt right. We were both broken in familiar ways, both waiting for someone to care enough to fix what was left. The workers looked uneasy when they saw me. One of them, a man named Luis, wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "Ma'am, we heard the place got sold. Are we out of work?" I shook my head. "No, you stay. Every one of you." He blinked, unsure if I meant it. The other family said they'd bring in their own people. "They won't," I said quietly. "They don't own it anymore." He smiled then, slow and disbelieving, like a man who hadn't had a reason to hope in a long time. The room smelled of damp wood and dust, but I didn't mind. I spent the whole afternoon walking through each hallway, noting what needed rebuilding. The cracked mirrors caught the light in strange ways, reflecting me in fragments. It didn't bother me. I was rebuilding too, piece by piece. By evening, Mia called. Her voice had that cautious tone she used when news was half good, half dangerous. "I've been digging through their company records," she said. "Charlotte, there's something you need to see." "What is it?" "Your husband's family. Their business isn't clean. I found transactions, money funneled through fake accounts, contracts that don't exist." She hesitated. "If this gets out, they'll lose everything." For a long moment, I said nothing. The air smelled of paint thinner and old wood. Outside, the wind hit the glass like a warning. Finally, I whispered, "Then maybe it's time they do." The first file I opened nearly made my hands shake. Numbers that didn't match, signatures that weren't Ryan's but carried his name anyway, accounts listed under shell companies no one had ever heard of. Every lie they'd built their empire on sat there in plain sight. I didn't need to dig deep. The dirt waited right on the surface. I printed everything: bank transfers, fake invoices, unpaid taxes hidden behind neat handwriting. Every page was a piece of their downfall. For years, they'd told me I wasn't smart enough to understand business. Evelyn's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and patronizing. "You leave the big things to us, dear." I used to believe that. I used to think keeping peace meant keeping quiet, but peace had cost me everything. And now silence was no longer my weakness. It was my weapon. I started planning the reopening as soon as the evidence was safe in Mia's hands. The resort would come back to life, but not for them. The old chandeliers were cleaned, the walls repainted, the sign replaced. Every hammer hit sounded like a heartbeat I'd forgotten I had. It felt poetic. The place they'd once dismissed as a failed investment was becoming the stage for their exposure. They loved masks, always hiding behind polite smiles and perfect reputations. I thought, if they loved masks, I'd give them one final party. I didn't tell anyone the truth about the event. I just called it a grand reopening Halloween gala. Local investors were invited, journalists too. The decorations were already arriving: velvet tablecloths, black candles, golden name cards. Everything looked elegant, controlled, deliberate. When the last invitation was ready, I paused before sealing it. The embossed gold letters read, "Williams Estate Group. My name, my ownership, my legacy." I dropped the stack into the mail chute and listened to the envelope slide out of sight. For the first time, the sound didn't remind me of loss. It sounded like justice, finally moving. They walked in smiling, the whole family dressed like they were stepping into victory. Ryan led them, his mother close behind, both confident enough to believe the world still belonged to them. I stood near the balcony, black satin catching the light, calm enough to let them enjoy the moment before it broke. The music softened as they entered, heads turning, whispers spreading. They thought this was their night. It wasn't. They believed they were here to meet investors, to discuss expansion, to celebrate the future of the Williams name. But when they saw the cameras, the journalists, and the unfamiliar faces filling the ballroom, I saw it. The first flicker of doubt crossed Evelyn's perfect smile. She whispered to Ryan, who frowned, scanning the crowd for someone to blame. I didn't make them wait long. I walked to the microphone in the center of the room, the click of my heels slicing through the murmur. "Good evening," I said softly. "Thank you for joining the grand reopening of Lakeview Resort, now proudly owned by Williams Estate Group." The projector behind me lit up. Pages appeared. Bank records, contracts, signatures they had forged, tax documents they had hidden. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything I could ever say. "These documents," I continued, "show the transactions made by Williams Construction over the past 3 years. Funds were diverted into personal accounts, government contracts were falsified, and employees' benefits were stolen to cover it." Gasps moved through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered my name. Evelyn took a step forward, her face drained of color. "Stop this," she hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." Ryan's voice followed, sharp and desperate. "Charlotte, this isn't how you fix things." I looked straight at him. "I'm not fixing anything. I'm revealing it." Grace tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Their father's glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. Reporters swarmed, questions flying faster than they could breathe. I turned back to the microphone, my hand steady. "This resort was built on lies," I said. "I'm just making sure the world knows who built them." Ryan pushed through the crowd until he was close enough for me to hear him. His face was pale, eyes wild. He leaned in, voice breaking. "You ruined us." I didn't move. I didn't even look away. "No," I said quietly. "You did that years ago." The sound of voices filled the ballroom, loud, sharp, panicked. Uniforms moved through the crowd, flashing badges, collecting papers I'd already handed over. The air felt thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Evelyn swayed, clutching her pearls before collapsing into one of the chairs. Grace started crying. Their father shouted something about misunderstandings, but no one was listening. The officers moved with quiet efficiency, leading him away while cameras followed every step. I stood near the doorway, watching it unfold. I didn't feel joy or anger, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after years of noise finally stop. They'd built their world on manipulation and pride, and now it was falling apart right in front of them. I thought I'd feel something when it happened, satisfaction, maybe triumph, but all I felt was peace. One of the servers approached me quietly, his voice almost trembling. "Ma'am, thank you for keeping us on when they said they'd fire everyone. We didn't forget." I nodded. He smiled once, brief and grateful, then turned back to his work. That small moment meant more than all the chaos around me. I walked toward the exit as the reporters shouted questions, their cameras flashing like lightning. Ryan was nowhere in sight. For a moment, I almost hoped he'd stayed inside, drowning in the noise he helped create. But then I heard it, his voice calling after me, low and desperate. "Charlotte, wait!" I didn't stop. The night air was cold against my skin as I stepped outside. He caught up breathless, his tie loose, his face pale. "Charlotte, please," he said. "Let's start over." I turned to him slowly. The wind carried the last sounds of sirens fading in the distance. "Start over?" I said quietly. "With what?" He looked at me like he was searching for the woman who used to forgive him. But she wasn't there anymore. I left her behind with the ashes of their empire. ChatGPT said, "The lights from the resort glowed behind me, soft and gold against the night. I could still hear the faint hum of voices inside, reporters talking, officers asking questions, the world piecing together what I had just undone." Ryan stood a few feet away, his tie loose, his eyes pleading like he finally saw what he'd lost. But it was too late for seeing. He should have noticed before I had to destroy the illusion he built. He stepped closer. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "you didn't have to do this. We could have fixed it." I looked at him, really looked, the way I used to when I still wanted to believe him. "Fixed it?" I said. "You can't fix something you never thought was broken." He swallowed hard. "I made mistakes, but—" I stopped him with a look. "You didn't make mistakes, Ryan. You made choices." The wind picked up, brushing through my hair, carrying the smell of lake water and smoke from the torches that lined the driveway. It reminded me of that first night years ago, my first humiliation at their dinner table when his mother told everyone, "She means well, but she's not one of us." I had smiled through that silence, too afraid to speak. Tonight, I didn't need to. He reached for my arm. "Please, we can start over." I stepped back. "You never noticed what you had until it stood against you." My voice stayed calm, even when his didn't. "Now you know how it feels to be on the outside." He stared at me, lost for words. The silence between us was heavy, final. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's peace that finally makes the noise. I turned toward my car, the headlights catching the shimmer of the lake. As I started the engine, I didn't look back. The resort lights grew smaller in the mirror, fading into the dark as the road curved toward the mountains. I drove in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. the kind that means freedom. The mornings at the resort are quiet now. The air smells like pine and fresh coffee, not smoke or shame. Guests laugh near the lake, their voices carrying through the halls where I once stood crying alone. The rooms are filled again, lights glowing against clean glass, the kind of warmth that doesn't ask for permission to exist. Sometimes I walk through the lobby and still can't believe it's mine. My name sits on the sign out front, gold against white wood. Simple, steady, permanent. Freedom feels strange at first, like silence after years of shouting. I don't rush anymore. I don't explain myself. The people who work here smile when they see me, not because they have to, but because they want to. I treat them the way I wish someone had treated me, like they matter. That's what dignity feels like. One afternoon, the receptionist brought me a small envelope with my name written in Ryan's handwriting. I knew before I opened it what it would be: an apology dressed as closure. I didn't need to read it. I'd already lived through every word he could ever say. I folded it once, placed it gently into the fireplace, and watched it catch flame. The fire cracked, bright and slow, reflections dancing across the window beside me. I saw myself in the glass, calm, unshaken, whole. For the first time, my reflection didn't look like a ghost. It looked like someone who'd finally come home. Outside, the lake shimmered under the evening sun. Somewhere, far away, they were probably still whispering about me, still pretending not to care. But I didn't mind. I smiled, watching the fire settle into quiet embers. Every year they forgot me. This year, they'll remember forever.